Hi, everyone. Welcome. So we're going to be talking today about mindful eating. Has anyone ever heard of this concept or idea about mindful eating? Sir, what have you heard about?
Is it about trying to eat the proper meals at the right time?
Some of it, yeah.
You know, like eat breakfast and more whole grains and skim milk, things like that.
So that could be incorporated into mindful eating, but it goes a little beyond that. So mindful eating, it's really about paying attention to the process of eating and just eating with more awareness. So really focusing on our internal hunger cues and all of our senses to fully enjoy food. We want to give attention to the smell of the food, the taste, the texture, and even the environment, just to really have a pleasant experience and an experience where we're developing healthier habits and really, like I said, enjoying our food, but with all of our senses in it. And so it really helps because it helps us have a healthier relationship with food. A lot of times we focus on a lot of external cues. What do I mean by external cues? Do you know?
Commercials or
Yeah,
or
that's a big one. All TV, right? You see commercials, you hear it on the radio. That is a huge factor. Sometimes we're not hungry, but we're constantly around all these ads about food, and that could trigger something. Another thing is when we eat and we're full, but there's still food on our plate. How many of us have done that where, well, we can't leave any food on the plate, but you're stuffed, right? So a lot of times that's an external cue also, just focusing on the food on the plate rather than on our hunger cues. So that would be more like mindless eating as opposed to mindful eating, which is what we're going to talk about. So that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. Now, in addition to that, we'll explain the benefits of slowing down when we're eating, and also we're going to have an activity about how to really practice this whole mindful eating concept. Now, like I said, we're going to try to really focus on mindfulness and our internal cues and not those external cues. Another external cue that is really common is calorie counting. Anyone here do calorie counting? So for a lot of calories are important. It's important to know how many calories are in food, what we're eating. But if we're only looking at calories and using that as a cue to satisfy us, again, that's an external cue. And I see this a lot with college students. I've been working with University Food Service for about 10 years now, and it's really common for students to tell me, well, I'm not going to eat that because it has X amount of calories. And a lot of times that's not a healthy approach. It's more important to, if you want to eat something you like, it's okay to eat it, but again, do it with mindfulness and enjoy it as opposed to depriving yourself. So again, those types of external cues, a lot of times they really affect our relationship with food. So why should we be practicing mindful eating? Any idea why that would be important? It does help us. Yeah, with our overall health, or especially our mental health. There's been some research over the last maybe like 20, 25 years about how this really has a positive impact on our emotions, our stress, anxiety. For people who suffer from eating disorders or even disordered eating patterns, when we bring mindfulness into the equation, it just really helps, again, have that healthier relationship with food. So yeah, it's almost like a form of meditation. Anyone here meditate? No? Meditation is also something that's very, very healthy. So if you don't meditate, try it. It helps. So again, that mind-body connection plays a really important part in our overall health. A lot of times we eat throughout the day, we snack, we're not really sure what we're consuming. We're so busy with other things that food sometimes is just kind of one of those routines. We're on autopilot. So the idea is to get out of autopilot and be more in control of what we're consuming, when, and how. So a perfect example is like here in the US, most people spend about maybe an hour eating for the entire day, yet we spend between 2.5 and 3 hours watching TV, or even more on tablets and games now. So that just shows how little time we really focus on our food compared to other countries, especially like in France or Spain, a lot of the Mediterranean countries where eating is much more of a longer, more pleasant process, maybe up to 2 hours to have your meal, be with friends. So that's a little bit more mindful also. And even in schools, how long do kids have to eat in school? It's pretty short time, right, to eat and play and do all of that stuff. So in this culture of multitasking, again, sometimes we eat very mindlessly. So think about today. What were you doing while you were having breakfast or lunch today?
Listening to TV when I was having breakfast.
Okay, so listening to TV while you were having breakfast. Do you feel like you enjoyed your breakfast, like you were actually able to be present with the TV on?
No, I was wolfing it down.
Okay, so wolfing it down.
Time-wise, yes, ma'am.
Right, time-wise. Anyone here?
Putting up the dishes while having breakfast.
So putting away dishes while having breakfast. So multitasking.
I don't eat breakfast.
Okay, so you don't eat breakfast, that's fine.
I do lunch.
So again, and that's very common. Most of us are always doing something else while we're eating, and especially in this environment, a lot of times it's studying or reading or things like that while eating. So really and we'll talk about this, but it's really taking maybe 20 minutes aside and just focusing on our meals. So what we're going to do now is practice this idea of mindful eating and what the process would be. Anyone here allergic to peanuts or can't have peanuts? Yeah, so everyone's okay with peanuts? Okay. So I put a little cup of peanuts in front of you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
And I will grab one. Would you like one? Would you like to participate? Are you okay with peanuts? Okay, so you have just some dry roasted peanuts in front of you. So don't eat them yet. We're gonna go through this. So the idea of mindful eating is to really create an environment of relaxation. So we don't want to be super stressed out, or because sometimes a lot of these emotions, they're the ones that trigger us to eat more. So really just relax. So everyone just relax here. What we're gonna, and think about also like your state right now. Are you hungry? If you are hungry, what would you eat? What would you want to eat? If you're not, if you're thirsty, like how do you feel, like on a just hungry, maybe thirsty or neutral? So think about that, just because it's important to always think about how hungry we are when we eat. We need to start thinking about our bodies and listening to our bodies and not the clock. not anything else, not like mom or dad, husband, wife telling us it's time to eat, right? It's about listening to our bodies, and when we're hungry, and we'll look at a hunger scale a little later, but when we're hungry, that's really the time to eat. We shouldn't be ignoring our hunger cues. So, thinking about the peanuts, take a peanut, just one, and really observe it. So you're gonna take it, and so just hold it between your thumb and finger, and you're gonna wanna just feel it. What does the texture feel like? How does it smell? Does it smell like peanut, or does it smell like salt? What does it smell like to you? It smells like peanut, right?
Peanuts.
So just think about, right, pretend like you've never seen this before, and you should be curious about what it is, how it smells, the texture, the shape, anything like that. The smell, does that trigger any memories or thoughts? Like, did you have a bad experience and maybe now hate peanuts, or do you love it? So a lot of times we don't think about these things when we're eating because we're so focused on getting to the next thing, right? We're not really in the present moment. So now smell the peanut, and smelling our food is really important because that's what's gonna really create more appetite. So a lot of times when we smell food, that really triggers like our hunger more and appetite, right? So smell the peanut, and now you could taste it. So what I want you to do is just place it in your mouth and taste it. So let it, just see let the coating of it just go throughout your mouth, and you're gonna chew it, but when you chew it, you have to let it go all over your mouth. So it should really cover everything in your mouth. And the reason for that is because there are taste buds all over our mouth. And when we do that, when we chew something and it coats everywhere, we're really getting more satisfaction out of that food. So what does that taste to you? Does it taste more like a peanut? Does it taste more salty?
More like a peanut to me.
You got more peanut?
Mm-hmm. My goodness.
More peanut than the salt. So anyone else? Did anyone else get more of that saltiness?
I didn't really, like when I first put it in my mouth, I just had texture. Then when I like switched it to the back, that's when I actually tasted
Okay.
saltiness, I guess.
Right. So get another piece and then just rub it on the tip of your tongue. Do you taste anything right on the tip?
Salty.
A little salty. Do you taste more or less than when you were chewing it?
It tastes less for me.
Less, right? And again, that's because we don't have that many taste buds right on the tip. But when we're really chewing something well, and this is really important because part of the whole mindful eating is really chewing our food well and slowing down. So when we chew it, you're getting more of that taste all over, and it's much more satisfying. Now, take a half, and you can actually cut that in half. So with a half of a peanut, you broke that in half, and now you have a quarter of a peanut. So eat that quarter of the peanut. And again, just make sure you're chewing it and it's really going all over your mouth.
Is it true that we sometimes like to chew, we favor one side than the other?
I think that is true. Like you have more.
More on my right side, and I try to do it on my left side because sometimes we can wear our enamel down from
Right, yeah.
one class, something about that years ago.
I think that is common. So with that little piece of peanut, did you taste more or less?
Yes.
So you tasted less? Who else tasted more or less?
The same.
It's about the same, right?
I feel like it wasn't enough to like, they were like, so try to move it on.
Right, and maybe it's not enough to move it around, but the taste is the same, right? So how do we usually eat peanuts?
Handfuls.
Just,
Handfuls, right?
well, just throw it in and just begin to chew.
So just throw it in handfuls. But this, if you're throwing it in handfuls, you're getting the same taste and satisfaction, really, as if you're doing a little quarter of a peanut. So that's just something to think about, especially when we're going out to restaurants or we're snacking and eating those handful of peanuts. A lot of times, mindlessly, we're not getting that same satisfaction.
So should we snack one at a time rather than handfuls?
Yes. One at a time and enjoy it, savor it. And so right now we've been, excuse me, we've been eating you've been eating maybe for about 4 minutes. And it's only been like 2 peanuts, right? So it's, again, it's about slowing down and just being aware of what's in your mouth, what the taste is like, what your emotions are at that point in time also, and why you're eating. So a lot of times we eat for many, many reasons. What are some of the reasons why we may eat?
Bored?
Bored.
Scheduling time.
If it doesn't fit in your schedule, right?
Right.
Any other reasons?
I want to eat like at 12, that's what I want to do. So I arrange my classes before and after 12 o'clock. So when I eat like that, I'm more in rush because I saved out that time for that.
Right, so you're kind of focusing on the clock and your schedule to eat, right, for your eating routines?
And that's a pleasure, I guess, to have the routine.
Routine.
I eat to stay up. So like if I have to stay up and I'm getting sleepy, I eat
Oh, okay.
to keep me up.
Are you aware of what you're eating, or is it more like autopilot?
I don't find it just to eat something just to stay up.
So what other things do you think you can do to stay up, or why are you needing to stay up, should I ask
Work,
first?
for example. Or when I was in school, if I needed to write a paper or
Right.
something, last minute, I'm trying to stay up so I can finish writing a paper. So, like, I don't know, just eating, like, it's, I guess, just like it gives my hand or I'm doing something
Right.
to,
So you're feeling awake and while doing that. You were-
I feel with me, I feel like it's more like a mind thing. Like, I don't get hungry, like, in my mind, like, I eat around 11 to 12, you know? And it's like, I'm not hungry, but once I hit that time, it's like I'm starving, like if you pass me, like, I just want to eat anything. And then the same at night, like, after like 7 or 8, whether I eat or not, it's like, I don't want to eat. Like, I think it's more like with me, it's like a more of a mind thing. It's like, but I mean, I guess everybody's different.
So are you waiting then till you're starving?
Well, if I can eat for whatever reason, but no, I try to eat like around 11:30. Like
Okay.
I eat, and then I try to eat before 7. So I kind of have a schedule where I eat. So but I think it's like, it's funny because I don't really get, like, a lot of people eat breakfast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't even crave it. Like, I can see you eating, and I'm like, no, I don't eat breakfast. And it's like nothing. But then once I hit that time, it's like, I eat.
It's time to eat, okay.
You know?
But that's fine, because when it's time and you're feeling hungry, you eat something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really do. And it's kind of like I have to, because it's like by then I'm starving. You know?
Right, and which is, yeah, you definitely should be eating. If you're hungry, and we'll come back to this, but let's talk, since we're on this, let's talk about hunger and satiety. So if you're hungry, there are physical signs to hunger, right? What do you feel when you're really hungry?
headache and nauseous.
Headache, yeah, sometimes you get nauseous. What else?
A little twinge in the stomach, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, that feeling in your stomach.
Like, noise too. Like,
The growling, rumbling, definitely. Hangry, yes. Yeah, I am, yes. I know all about hangry. But so there are physical signs that tell us when we're hungry, right? And that's something that's really important. But we don't really want to let ourselves get to that point where we're starving and we're nauseous and all of these things, right? Because then it's harder for us to really satisfy that hunger and eat mindfully. So we'll talk about this scale in a minute, but other ways to tell if you're hungry is that desire to eat doesn't go away. A lot of times when we're bored, if we get distracted, we won't think about maybe that snack we were gonna have, or if we're tired, or there are a lot of emotions sometimes that come up that make us wanna eat. But then if we suddenly get distracted, we forget about it. So that's not hunger. Hunger is really when it doesn't go away. You know you want to eat. And then like those old leftovers, even those sound appetizing and you would eat those. You're that hungry. But then it's also harder to satisfy that. So don't ignore your hunger.
Why is it that like when I'm hungry and like if I'm in between something, I don't have time to break away to eat, and then by the time I do eat, I will eat like less than what I would have normally ate if I ate when I was hungry. So why is like when you prolong your hunger, you actually get full faster?
You know, it's so complicated. Our appetite is so complicated and eating, but a lot of times it's kind of like you reach a peak and then it goes down, and so you're ignoring that hunger, and so training your body to ignore it. And so sometimes that happens a lot with, I know a lot of people who don't eat all day, maybe till like dinner, and it's like you keep suppressing that hunger, and then your body just stops listening to those cues, those internal hunger cues. So a lot of times that's what's going on with that. So with our hunger and fullness scale, one of the things that we want to think about is, so there's a rating, it's from 1 to 10. So being a number 1 is when you're starving. So starving, you're feeling weak, lightheaded, dizzy, or other signs of hunger. Number 2 is when we're very hungry, a little irritable. Maybe this is where the hangry comes in. You want to eat everything in sight. Number 3 is hungry, not yet uncomfortable. You kind of know you want some food. 4 is slightly hungry, but you can wait. 5 is neutral. When you're at a 6, this is when you've eaten and you're filling up but still comfortable. 7 is full but not yet uncomfortable. Your hunger is gone. So you always want to be between a 3 and a 7. When you've eaten and you're at a number 8, that's when you're too full. You're slightly uncomfortable. A 9, you're definitely uncomfortable. 10 is Thanksgiving full, where you just can't even move. So we never really want to get to be anywhere between that 8 or 10. It's always when we're hungry, think about being between a 3 and a 7. And that way you're going to have a more pleasurable experience. You're not going to be so hungry that you just want to eat everything, or you won't have missed that moment where, it would have just hit the spot. So that's something to really think about. In Japan, the Okinawan people practice something called it's like Hari Hachibu, something like that. Sorry if I'll look it up, but pretty much what it's this train of thought that came about during Confucius, and it's to eat till you're 80% full. And when you think about the Okinawan people, they are some of the people that live the longest. I mean, like 100 years old. And a lot of people say that part of it is because of this idea of eating till you're 80% full. So again, you want to eat when you're hungry, not when you're bored, not because you're angry or stressed out. It's really when you're hungry. And you want to make sure that you're taking your time and that you're really enjoying your meal and not eating so much that you're feeling like at a number 8 where you're just too full or anything beyond that. Does this scale make sense? Do you think this is something you could try next time you're ready to have a meal?
Well, that's what I do on a regular basis. I never really been quote unquote hungry. When I eat, I generally eat what's on my plate, but it's not to where it's, like overly crowded, the plate,
Right.
I just seem to know when to have enough, or when I go out, and especially I feel full because the portion size in Texas or in restaurants are
Yes.
big. So that lasts me. People say, "Oh, I might have mine later on," but for some reason I can eat that, then that'll just last me the whole day. That if I know I'm going out to a restaurant like Carrabba's or the Aquarium or Papados,
Right.
that's enough for me because I always have my breakfast. I just like to have breakfast. And that starts the digestive system, and then I just have, I consider that my dinner and lunch because it's so big.
Right. It holds you over till
Holds
the
me
next
over.
day.
And then I won't need nothing else. Maybe something to drink, but
Right.
so far just snacking after that, snack, but no.
Yeah. And a lot of times, when we go out, we do have that larger meal. And if you're not hungry, then there's no reason to eat. A lot of times, again, we're thinking about these external cues. So I know my mom would always say, well, you always have to have dinner. You can't go to bed without dinner, right? But well, I'm not hungry. So sometimes if you're not hungry, you may not need those 3 meals a day. Other people do. I know, I am like a 3 meal per day person. I'm always starving by the time I wake up, so I have to have breakfast. I'll have my lunch and dinner. Other people don't. If you're not a breakfast eater, there's nothing wrong with that if you're not hungry. It's different, I think, sometimes if you wake up, you're hungry, and then you ignore that and not eat. So that's something
But now I'm
important.
confused.
Yes.
Because you said if you're not hungry, don't eat. But then you also hear you should eat more as far as your metabolism. You want to keep your metabolism up. So you should, even though you're not hungry, you're still able to eat. So, you shouldn't eat anything big, but still snack even when you're not hungry, just to keep going, keep your metabolism going. So it's do we not eat, or do we eat to keep our metabolism going? Because if we skip meals, supposedly that affects our metabolism.
So we eat when we're hungry, but it's about, and we're going to talk about portions, but you want to do the smaller portions. Right now, he brought up you have a really large meal at a restaurant because the portions are just huge. And sometimes we will eat those and then not be hungry for the rest of the day. So, and that's normal because you're probably consuming 1,200 calories in a meal, which is what we would eat in a day.
Well, one reason why I do it too, because I have acid reflux since 1999, and in the 90s I used to eat heavy meals at night. Didn't know it was bother me, but when I threw up some blood and acid, that's when I found out. But anyway, here lately, the last couple of years, I've been eating my big meal during lunch, and if I'm hungry or anything, I'll eat something real light.
Right.
But I always eat, like I said, something fibrous or, like a fruit and cereal and almond milk, stuff like that. She said to get the digestive, because we were told, or it was, say, well, you got to get the digestive going in the morning. If you don't eat anything, then that's going to tighten up your colon, that's going to mess up your digestive system. So eat something, a piece of toast with, we told blah, 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 But I've always done it anyway, even before they said that. But here lately, as I said, eat my dinner for lunch, and then if I have anything in the later afternoon, something real small.
Right. So you're kind of having more of your calories earlier in the day when you're out and more active.
And more light for my digestive system.
Right, and it works for you.
They say. So
Yeah.
I have a condition where I had to do that.
Right, and it helps, especially not having that larger meal at night for the GERD. Definitely is a good
'Cause I'm lactose
technique.
intolerant too, so I'm just messed up. I like ice cream, so.
But you've been able to manage your routines and your eating to really help manage your GERD, right? So that's good. That's the point. And so so here's the thing, nutrition and eating, it's not one size fits all. We all have to look at our own bodies, our own levels of hunger, our own just lifestyle, and really try to incorporate healthiness into that. So mindfulness is more about being aware of the experience, not having any distractions while we're eating, and slowing down also. So when we, again, talking about the hunger and satiety, so that's something that's really important because we need to slow down. So when we're eating a meal, stopping 2 to 3 times while you're eating is really going to help so that you realize where you are. Because a lot of times we're on the rush and we may just, like you said, you wolf down your meal, right? You're not even aware of what's going on. And so you may miss that point where you're really full. So eating slow, stopping 2 to 3 times per your meal is really gonna help you understand how satisfied or really how hungry you still are. Chewing your food, after finishing whatever's on your plate, really making sure you listen to your body. Are you still hungry? Could you eat a little bit more? Are you thirsty? Some days may be different than others. Some days maybe you're more active and you are definitely more hungry. And it's okay to have that food as long as you're aware of what you're consuming and why. And that it's not because you're distracted or you're emotional or any of these other distractions.
Do you think it's generational also? When I was younger, and as people were saying, we used to eat at the breakfast and dinner table.
Yeah.
And even at lunch at school, we were told to take our time and eat, but after the events of frozen dinners and everything, we kind of slowly gotten away from taking our time, even at home. You know, take out stuff and
Yes.
everything. So do you think that might have something to
I
do
think
with
it
not
does.
paying attention how we eat? It's just,
Right. Yeah, it's not
as you
as
said, you know, like when our parents told us, take your time, eat your food, you know, eat this because it's good for you. Don't gobble down your milk. You know what I'm saying?
right. Yeah, it's not as common anymore. I mean, some families still eat together, but now it's sometimes you're either eating in front of the TV or everyone's in their room. But I think when you have that sense of community and like a family meal, you're definitely more, it's a better environment and you could eat.
Because you can talk and have conversations. And,
Right.
as you say, slow down and, you know, what's happening to your day and but have to
Exactly.
respond, you know, so you take your time.
Yeah, and so when you take your time also, it helps our brain register our fullness level. So it is true that it takes about 20 minutes for all those hormones and chemicals to go through and tell our brain that we're full. But if we're eating like at a buffet and we're in a rush and just eat our food in 5 minutes, we may eat more than our body really is telling us it needs. So slowing down is really important. A lot of times when we slow down, we're chewing our food more, we're also savoring it more and enjoying it. And so this is where, and I know it's difficult and sometimes it sounds conflicting to say, well, you know, should we be eating a chocolate cake every day? Well, probably not, because it's high in fat and calories and sugar. But if we do want it, I think it's okay to give ourselves permission to have a piece of cake, have a bite, really enjoy it, savor it, and you may realize that you actually don't need the whole cake. You only wanted 3 bites. And that's really when we start getting in tune with our body and how satisfied we are with food. So And here you go. We end up getting a lot of pressure out of 10 bites instead of enjoying the first 2 bites and just gobbling that down. So that's why the slowing down is really important. Questions about that? About just slowing down or anything else?
Yeah, as you said, it's just a time, I think, to find the time to do that. If you're a college student, young or old, it's kind of hard when you have tests to prepare for, exams, you know,
Right.
driving to school, everything out. Is there some way that we can do that? I mean, process that we're supposed to be doing to try to do that?
So honestly, it's just something that is up to you and how you could try to fit it into your schedule. Just setting those 20 minutes aside to really have your meal and enjoy it. A lot of times that feeling satisfied and that level of fullness, a lot of times it comes from that sensory experience. So what we really did with that peanut is smelling it, looking at the texture, the appearance, and really just thinking about each bite. And that's a lot of times what helps us and our brain register what we're eating. So it takes about 20 minutes to do that. And a lot of times you'll notice that you may be eating less not because you're restricting yourself, but a lot of times because you realize that you need less food to feel full than you thought.
So also what you're saying is almost like having a glass of fine wine. They always say, don't just drink it, savor it, smell it.
Exactly.
Admire it, see what the texture of it, the texture, what I mean by the temperature
Yeah.
of it, if it's warm, there's a difference, things like that. Really, just don't swallow it, as you say, just like with the peanut, kind of swirl it around in your mouth. People are like, really?
Yes.
You just wine. No, if you're drinking the good stuff, you don't do that.
You're not going to chug a good bottle of wine, right?
You're right.
So yeah,
So,
that's
I think we don't have to have anything fancy to. We shouldn't have anything fancy to do what you're saying. We should just do it in our everyday mealtime.
exactly.
Yeah, appreciate it, like we're doing fine.
Yeah, and just
steak.
taking that time, a little bit of time for ourselves, for that little just moment of relaxation when you could just not think about anything else but the plate in front of you. So the other thing that we need to talk about is mindful portions. So years ago, like 1950s, hamburgers looked very different than they do now, right? So maybe 20 years ago, a fast food hamburger was about 330 calories. Today it's gonna be 600 calories or more. So, we're still the same people. It doesn't mean we can eat that much more, right? It's just how our portions have gotten distorted over the years. So sometimes if you do go out, I recommend if you're gonna get a burger or a sandwich or things like that, cut it into pieces, and it helps you figure out the portions of, maybe if you're going to get a Subway sandwich, cut it into 4 little pieces and eat one, and then eat the rest if you're still feeling hungry. But it helps us manage the portions a little more. So most of the fast food meals or even restaurants, they have really large portions. We talked about this earlier, and so a lot of times they contain as much calories as we would need in a day. So again, we may not need all of that. Just because we're buying this meal doesn't mean we have to eat the whole thing. It's the same thing with when we go out, when we're eating, we don't have to wipe our plate clean, right? It's okay to leave some food behind if you're full and not hungry.
I think that comes to part of like growing up, the parents would be like, eat all your food.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So they sort of train you to, when you have food left, you'll want to eat it, So.
I forget up to take one. It's like, hey, hold it.
Yeah.
But I had,
Exactly.
all of us, like, it's not, I mean, we just sit there, my dad or mom was in this, so we finish the
Yeah.
plate. So it is a habit, because I feel
Mhm.
like that sometimes I want to eat, I'm not even hungry. But I think in the
Right.
back of my mind, I still have that, and we're like, I have to.
Finish.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you wasting money if you don't finish your food. Like, why waste all my
I don't
money?
even know what I think about, but it's like, it's more, I think it's more internal too, like, it's just
Mhm.
there, like, I'm not doing it on purpose, like, but unless I pay attention to it, like, I'm still eating, like, I'm
Yeah.
You're just trained to just eat everything.
Yeah, I feel like I have to finish what's in my plate, but like you said, I think we just do that and do it so little, it's hard to get out of it.
Right.
And some people don't know how to cook in portions because, another reason why they were saying, some people say, well, I don't like leftovers. Well, cook so we won't have leftovers, but who does that? So that's what some of our parents would do. Well, because I know you're not going to eat these leftovers, so eat it now, be done with it.
Yeah, my mom would always say,
That kind of-
just eat it instead, otherwise I'll throw it away.
Yeah, and instead of throwing it out the window because you're not going to eat it. I know that.
And so a lot of those things, it's part of our experience, right? We grew up with these types of, with our parents, or sometimes a lot of times it's cultural also, where you go over to someone's house and you can't say no to food, right? God forbid you try to tell your so-and-so relative that you don't want any food because it's maybe disrespectful. But again, those are all external cues, and we have to learn to retrain ourselves to not think about those external things, but think about our body and be more in tune with our internal cues, with our hunger, with our levels of fullness and all of that. And it takes time, it's a process, and it's hard because it's been years of training, right, of like parents telling us to eat everything on our plate, but now it's hard. It's hard to just flip the switch. So it is a process to really think about how to shift our mindset. And one of the things that can help is to start with a smaller plate. So maybe a 9-inch plate. Those are the little, it's not the big ones, but the salad plate size. And that way, if you do want to eat the whole thing, it's less food, and then you're not feeling guilty about leaving anything on your plate. And then again, take smaller bites, appreciate the flavor and the texture, chew your food properly. How many times do we chew our food typically? Have you ever noticed?
Well, we're supposed to, I believe, 10 times, they say something like that. But I don't know how many times, actually, but I think we were told 10 times. You food 10 times.
Do you think we all chew, or do most of the people chew, right? Sometimes it's like 2, 3, and then you swallow.
Like, yes.
It's like the lollipop commercial.
Right.
Like you say 1, 2, 3.
And it goes down, right? And so we're not really enjoying it. We're not chewing. So really, you want to do maybe 20, 25 times, and that's hard. That's a lot of work, so it takes a while. Right. So that's why your meal.
You could, and they say, you eat that long, it's like, are you chewing your cud?
Yeah.
I'm like, "Cow, chew that."
So, but chew it longer, chew it properly. We shouldn't have, like large bites and food going down. You just want to chew your food properly. It's going to help you also with the portioning and with that whole process of really making your meal last 20 minutes. Because again, that's how long it will take for our body to register and our brain to register how full it is. So it helps when we're taking smaller bites and not really having any of those distractions. Any questions so far? Okay, so some last tips on how to practice this mindful eating concept. And so again, just to reiterate, this is really about awareness. We want to acknowledge our internal hunger cues and really use all of our senses to embrace our food, We're not talking about like a restrictive diet. We're not talking about some sort of detox or anything, any fad diet that is telling you to eliminate a certain food group. That's really not healthy. But what is healthy is just being more aware of just our everyday feelings towards food, and our body's hunger signals. So when you practice mindful eating, you just really want to be in tune with your body. If you're, right now, if you are a breakfast eater, that's fine. If you wake up in the morning and you know you feel physical hunger, you should be eating breakfast. Sometimes, and there's a lot of conflicting research on whether breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? Sometimes they say yes, other studies come out and say no, not really. So honestly, it all depends on you. If you're not a breakfast eater, I'm not going to force you to be one, because I want you to focus on your own hunger cues and your own body signals. The other thing is that you want to take inventory of your emotions around food. So you really want to ask yourself, am I truly hungry? Or is it stress that is making you want to eat? Are you having some other emotion? And if it is not hunger, you really have to stop and think about how to manage that other emotion so that it's not constantly leading you to want to mindlessly eat. So we talked about meditation, but what other stress relievers are there? If you're feeling stressed out and you may want to go for
Exercise.
the food. So exercise, definitely, that's good. Anything else? You could drink water, yeah. Sometimes that helps.
Water, I feel like water also takes a little bit like the hunger away. Like if I'm hungry and I'm not able to eat at that moment, like if I drink water, it kind of becomes, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes you may be dehydrated.
But everybody's is different, you know.
Yeah,
For me, it does.
because sometimes if we're not drinking enough water or liquids, we're dehydrated. And so we actually may think we're hungry, but it's just that we need water. So that's definitely something that could be happening. So yeah, there are a lot of things to manage stress, right? It could be talking with a friend, going for a walk, journaling, or really anything. So it's really just thinking about your emotions around food, and if there are any patterns, that's also something that's really important, and it will help you pinpoint those areas where maybe you need to work on a little more. Eat without distractions. So I know this is difficult because we multitask all the time, but these distractions include our phones, computers, driving, being on our iPads or other tablets. I see this all the time, and I know it's difficult here, but it's just something that it's really important to just limit the distractions. Even if it's one meal a day, limit those distractions for that one meal, and that's going to be really helpful. Do you have a question?
I was just gonna make a comment. Like,
Yeah.
When my family and my kids, when we have dinner, I tell them no toys, no phones, no tablets, nothing. Because, I'll say, okay, dinner's ready, and they'll come, but, somebody has their phone, or my son wants to bring his Legos or something, and I'm like, no toys, no and so that we can talk about it.
Yeah, and we were talking about that earlier, how important it is to, have that family time. And again, it's slow down. It's not that, if you're thinking about our entire day, it's not that long, that little chunk that you have to ourselves. So yeah, that's great. So slow down also. Slow down and notice. So we talked about chewing the food. Slowly chew your food. Again, think about engaging all of your senses, whether it's the smell, the taste, everything into your meal, and really having that awareness with your food, and being grateful about it too. Put your fork down after each bite. That also helps slow down our meal. A lot of times, and I know I notice myself doing this a lot of times when I'm in a rush, but you just never put your fork down. And it's kind of interesting when you're aware of that. take a bite and then put your fork down, chew it. And again, it really slows down the process. And so all of these things should really help make your meal last 20 minutes. So again, that's the goal, making your meal last 20 minutes. The other thing that's not on here, but that I'll bring up is cleansing your social media. And so what I mean by that is that there are so many things out there about food and dieting and eat this because it's the new miracle food, or don't eat that because it's going to kill you. And the internet and social media, it's so full of so much misinformation. So I would just say, don't follow any of that just because it's toxic to our well-being. I think sometimes all these stories that are just not based on really anything other than the latest blogger or something. So just be aware of that, and maybe find some more inspiring types of social media if you are, into all of that. Let's see. Any questions about this?
I guess my downfall is I work and eat, especially like right now. It's a beginning of school for PhD, so it's beginning of school, super busy for work for me right now. So luckily I even had time to like even come here, but I don't really have time to like leave my office to eat. So that it lasts 20 minutes, but my food lasts more like an hour because I like sit there and eat and then go back to work and then eat something.
So you're not focused on that.
So I'm not focused. So it's hard to. It's working and eat is where I have a problem.
Right. So is there anything you do, even if you start with short little chunks of time, maybe not the 20 minutes, but 10, where you could start working your way towards that?
Yeah, I could. It's more, probably just have to train myself to do it because I'm so used to working and eating
Right.
at the same time and not leaving my desk that it would take a large adjustment to actually get away from my desk, to actually enjoy my food and then come back.
And so that's going to be your homework.
Yeah.
Just something, and again, this is just something for ourselves, right? That's important for well-being. And it could just be one meal a day, and then you see how you feel. But again, it's not like a light switch. It's hard. It's a process. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves daily. But there's been a lot of success with people who really just focus on the mindfulness and being in the present moment, and it helps your overall health.
What is it she said? A lot of jobs nowadays, they don't have 2 10-minute breaks. So it would be pretty good if they kept to that, because as you said, you could have a small, if you were a breakfast eater like me, then you wait till the 10-minute break around about 10 something, and you eat something light, and then all through the day, then that was pretty good. So even if you're hungry like at lunch, like people say, and then you can do that and then just taper down for the 10 minutes into dinner. But again, a lot of businesses don't have 2 10-minute breaks no more. Just
Right.
30-minute lunch, and then as she said, you can't help but to wolf your food. And even with that 20 minutes that you say to savor it, you're so worried about trying to get back to
your office.
or back to the job. It's only 30 minutes instead of an hour.
Right, that's true. So yeah, and everyone has different schedules and again, lifestyle. So it's trying to incorporate certain things, and maybe you can't apply everything, but the things that you feel are important or that you can easily apply, maybe you can start with that. Even if it's like chewing your food slower, maybe that's the one thing you could focus on until you really build up and move on to the next levels. Any questions? I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
just
thank
a quick
you.
reminder that next week we are having our Valentine's Day Zoom up from 4 to 6. Depending on the weather, it'll either be on the north deck or in the Student Life Center studio. Now we're going to do our drawing for, you get to choose a fantabulous prize.
Oh, I'll read. Charmaine?
Yay!
Yeah.
Hey, Charmaine.
Awesome. And we hope to see you all next week and at other future workshops.